Hello and welcome to Savage Garden, an Interview the Vampire podcast sampling AMC's Immortal universe one morsel at a time. We promised we would be back with more from series two, and we haven't lied. We are back after looking at episode two. We are now back to discuss the third episode of season two, No Pain, which just because I know that it winds Naomi up, it's ranked ninth. It's ranked ninth on IMDb with 8.2. And again, and as I said before, even like the lowest one of these, we're still around an eight, which for, television is especially good because obviously there's some episodes that are so bad in some shows that they get like a four or a five. So when your weakest episode still has like an 8 point something, I think that, speaks to the show. And yeah, we will get kind of straight into it I think, Naomi, you've described this as Armand's fan fiction episode.
Yes, this is basically an episode of fan fiction and incredibly bad decisions from both Louis and Claudia. It was written by Heather Belson and directed by our favorite director, Levan Akin, who is a fantastic, fantastic director of the series. And it is a beautifully shot episode. But yeah, and it's tricky because you don't want to go in victim blaming Louis and Claudia, but there are so many bad lifestyle choices made here. But we start with Daniel. I was about to call him Danielle then. Daniel having escaped the smug marrieds, and he's chilling in a beautiful sushi restaurant in Dubai, and he is interrupted by Raglan James of the Talamasca. And Justin Kirk was, along with William Finkner, probably the main highlight of the Talamasca series. We only see him like very briefly here, but one thing I think Ronan Jones does really well is he's like, everyone I cast needs to be able to stand up and go toe to toe with Sam Reid and Jacob Anderson, who are both incredibly formidable actors. And so he sort of casts really small roles as if they are going to be major players. And if they do decide to adapt The Tale of the Body Thief, he will be center stage completely because he will either have to be pretending to be Lestat or they'll do some sort of trickery. But either way, he will be very central to the plot. And he's great fun. He was great fun in Talamasca. The episode he was in was probably the strongest of them.
Yeah. And I mean, before we kind of get into Raglan and the Talamasca, just that fish is still alive. I thought that sushi was raw, but not like it's still moving.
I mean, it's omakase, which means that the chef serves you what he wishes to serve you. I have never been served live sushi. I mean, you can certainly there are some dishes like there's this sort of shrimp dish with tiny little shrimps where they get them live and then they put all of I think it's more of a maybe a Thai dish where you sort of cook them effectively. I think it's called jumping shrimp. You cook them in effectively in the lime juice and everything and they try and escape. Now, one shouldn't be a hypocrite. I eat vast quantities of shellfish. Yum, 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 yum. But I also don't wish to see them massacred directly in front of me, unless, we're on a desert island and we have no choice but to feed ourselves. So, yes, having it wriggling away but then that's probably like a very high class establishment that does like very interesting foods. But yes, Danielle's being like, no, I prefer them not wriggling around. Thank you very much. And then he's introduced to Raglan James, who comes in and does a really naff sort of James Bond type thing, pretending to talk on the phone and talking to Daniel, which is very funny. But the main piece of information we get from him is that there are currently, at that point, 1,600 vampires in the world.
Hmm. And that's up from 900.
Yes, so that's gone up by 700 vampires in a year. And as he calls it, the Great Conversion. And it'll be intriguing to see if they come back to that. Because we got the whole thing in Talamasca where the Talamasca seem to be like dead keen on more vampires,
Yeah.
which was never really clear because the Telemaster was deeply confusing and could actually have been effectively a 2 hour film.
Yeah, what I enjoy about this scene as well is because this is series two, so this will have been after we've had a whole season of Mayfair Witches, and
Yep.
the Talamasca is quite present during Mayfair Witches, so it's one of those things where if you are just watching Interview the Vampire, you've got this, who is this man? What is he going on about? But if you have come from Mayfair Witches, you're like,
Mm.
ah, it's Talamasca. What does he want with Daniel?
Nicely interconnected AMC's Immortal universe.
Mm.
Um, it's absolutely Daniel to just be like, I don't give a fuck who you are, and just to call him out in front of everybody. I thought that was very, very funny. But it sort of unsettles him, but also doesn't seem to bother him unduly. And then we get back to the beautiful Dubai apartment where Louis is having a lovely snooze. And we get Daniel chatting to Armand in that horrifyingly bleak concrete prison.
Armand's having a little float, and you've got real Rashid, who is being very polite about, his
Mm.
master while they're, floating, just a few feet away.
I don't really understand how anyone looked at this scene of this bleak, grey, concrete prison with the sole source of light being the cherry tree, sole source of light and colour, and saw Armand floating by those bookshelves and was knowing that Louis cannot fly and was like, hey, this is a healthy relationship. I mean, even from a Dom sub perspective, even if we sort of assumed, because the dynamics, I mean, they don't have that dynamic. That's the whole point. But the dynamic that they are playing is Louis is the Dom and Armand is the sub, even though Armand is never not in control for a single millisecond. But even if we were like, oh, Louis loves telling him to go get his books, Lestat just built him a library. Lestat just made him a library. Why would you have it floating so that every single time Louis is on his own, or maybe that's the whole point. Louis is never meant to be on his own, is he? It's just ugh. Every time I see it, there were so many things in this episode that sort of cause full body shudders. And I do think as you watch this episode, if we took the impression, I'm sorry, if we switch out Louis in your mind with a woman, this episode plays very differently.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. It's horrifying. And I think that because Louis is a man, we don't always, you know, comment on how deeply unpleasant some of the dynamics in this episode are. But yeah, we have Rashid chatting about morality and everything else, and Ahmad's like, yeah, we're done. And then he comes to have a little chat with Daniel, wearing again another delightful, slightly open shirt. This beautiful brown color, which offsets his skin tone beautifully. He always wants to look his fanciest for Daniel, I think. And the way that he looks at Daniel in this scene is borderline outrageous. Like if Daniel was a young girl, we would be like, what the fuck is going on? Unseemly. Very tender, very beautiful. I mean, bearing in mind, of course, that he's not meant to really know this man. The way that he's looking at him in this scene, wouldn't you think Daniel would be like, what's up with that? Why are you looking at me like you want to fuck me and kill me? And I'm not really clear what order you want to do that in.
Mm.
He's a very confusing man. And then we get the classic line because Daniel's asking them how they basically hide from modern technology. And he says, no one at Amazon is trying to sell us blenders. And when I was at New York Comic Con, at the end of at the end of the session, everyone obviously rushed to the front of the stage. And the actors, God bless them, were so sweet, and they were so apologetic that they couldn't sign because they had the Walking Dead spin-off needed to get straight in after them. But Assad was talking to people, and then someone raised up. They brought with them like a bloody blender. It was a blender that they'd colored with like dye. And I saw him practically skip across that stage to make a beeline for that person, signed it, and then kind of did a, I'm out, I'm done type gesture and was gone. I thought that was the funniest thing I've ever seen. Like he was called, the call of the blender spoke to him.
So I guess what we're saying is, if anyone is autograph hunting around Assad, they should have a blender to hand.
Blinger blender. Blinger. He was absolutely delighted. It was hilarious. And then now basically we launch into what is effectively fan fiction. I mean, it's sort of got elements of it, but this is effectively Armand writing himself in real time, a beautiful archive of their own fic, sort of frenemies meet cute about his relationship with Lestat. And it's really interesting that he is doing this not in front of Louis. This is purely for Daniel's benefit. And I think part of it is obviously trying to set the narrative for the novel and control the narrative. But it's also, I think, because he wants to engender in Daniel as much sympathy for him as possible.
Yeah, and also, if he does have some feelings for Daniel, I mean, one, there's flaunting your husband, but then there's also, throwing another X, in there as well that just shows that you're not necessarily, a wifey man. You could stray with the right person.
Yeah, basically, he's trying to make it seem that not only is he sensitive and kind and thoughtful and abandoned, but, he also fucks.
Yeah.
It's an important thing for people to know. It's like, Daniel, hey, trust me, I fuck. Yeah. So we start in 1556, which again shows that it's important to note that Armand has been leader of this coven for literally
Yeah.
centuries, which I do think is an important thing to bear in mind for the rest of the series. Because my single biggest question all the way through is, Armand, you are obscenely powerful. You could just massacre this coven and start again at any given point. There is no point in which his power is ever really under question. So everything that happens is because he allows it to happen. And I don't really understand why he doesn't just decide, fuck all of you. I'm going to have a lovely little relationship with Louis. I'm going to kill you all if you criticize me and start again.
She just likes that control.
I know, but he could have that again. And I think that's the thing. I mean, you're absolutely right. Every single thing is about control. And ultimately, with Louis, it is because he repeatedly rejects, in the same way that Lestat reacted horrifically when he was ultimately rejected. It's the same thing here. Louis rejects Armand over and over and over and over again until Armand has to assert ultimate control. But he could have made the decision to just have that relationship with Louis and assert his control in a different way. I just don't think Louis was important enough for him to do that.
Well, and also, yeah, he's kind of been friends with these people for centuries, and
Mm,
making new friends sucks.
that's true.
Particularly the older you get, the harder it is. And he's how many centuries old? It's impossible.
It's very hard.
He doesn't want to be like hanging out with like some newbie fledgling vampire. That's,
He doesn't want to have to go to book groups.
no, he doesn't want to be hanging out with Gen Alpha. That's just not for him.
I mean, book groups suck. CrossFit sucks. The gym, ugh. Yeah, this is true. I mean, I'm sure he could pick up quite a good coven and spoons on a Friday night, but is it recommended? Probably not. Probably not. I reckon the Nando's crew would do well for him though.
Hmm.
Go down your typical Nando's on a Saturday night. I reckon Armand could come out of that with a very solid coven. I reckon. But they'd be driving him mad because he'd be like, "Can you show up somewhere?" And they'd be like, "Do I have to?" Yeah, it would be tricky. But we start in 1556 and they are calling themselves the Children of Darkness. And it's all very shabby chic. It's all very like Zoolander derelict. They're all grubby and disgusting and gross. And they become aware of Lestat, who is wandering around looking incredibly handsome. And we find out that we know about Magnus, but he has been sired by a deserter of Armand's coven. And then we get poor Lestat in this incredibly over-sexualized adaptation of him. And all of it's awful because, you have Armand effectively calling him a whore from minute one because he describes him as a patronized, tarted up dervish. And obviously, patronized is a reference to, effectively the French actors of the day quite often being sex workers who were patronized by rich patrons. Sort of think Satine in Moulin Rouge, I guess, is the way. Yeah, so he's basically accusing Lestat of selling his body for sexual favors from patrons to enable him to be on the stage. We have him dressed as a clown, as a harlequin, whereas in reality, Lestat played Lelio, who is the romantic lead. But Armand's got him prancing around on stage, dressed as a harlequin, dressed in makeup, which does, it has to be said, make Sam Reid look very, very pretty. They've gone out of their way in that sequence to make Sam Reid, and in fact, it's true of all of the sequences because the focus of all of these scenes isn't really Lestat, it's Armand's desire for Lestat. So he's it's very hard to take the figure we saw in the hut at the end and sort of conflate him with this Lestat that Armand is trying to sell. So yeah, we have this hypersexualized, very beautiful, slightly feminized version of Lestat. And of course, Armand is very honest in what he says, which is that he had to bring him under control by any means. And he's furious that Lestat rejects him. And the come to me doesn't work in any way, shape, or form, even though that worked for Lestat and Louis. Lestat is having absolutely none of it. And so Armand just turns into an insane stalker, which, to be honest, is probably the one part of the fan fiction it's very easy to buy. And then we get our first glimpse of Nicholas. And it must have been quite hard for Joseph Potter to be cast in this one episode in the hope that he would get to come back and play a much, much bigger role. Like, not even next year, because the pace of these productions is so slow. It's like, what, 2-3 years later?
Yeah.
So, and Roland Jones said that he was specifically cast because he could go toe to toe with Sam Reid, which is great. So we get this scene of Lestat in his big wolf killer coat, which is the coat that the villagers gift him after he kills the wolves that are threatening the village where he lives, that kill his dogs, which is very sad. He's wearing his beautiful wolf killer coat and he's wandering along with Nikki, who is not yet a vampire, and repeatedly rejects Armand, who reacts in the way that many toxic masculine people do when they are perpetually rejected, and that he comes up with an overtly crass display of power. He freezes everyone, he sends Lestat to his knees, and he kidnaps poor Nikki. And obviously Lestat tries to go up against Armand, and it's like a child. It's like a teeny little kitten in comparison to Armand. I mean, Armand's got literally centuries of power. And so poor Lestat has to just sit there and watch Nikki being stolen, which is awful. And then we have the entire sequence of Lestat effectively burning down, metaphorically speaking, Armand's coven in about 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And he looks very beautiful. We sort of have this grand diva appearance of him holding the cross and calling Jesus the sad man with the nails in his hands, and basically I know, telling all of the coven members, like, just go do what you want to do. You don't have to live like this. No God, no Satan, nobody's going to punish you for it. And Armand lets him do it because, to be honest, he's fed up to the back teeth of living in squalor with these people. So he lets him come in and destroy the coven. And then we get all this pure fanfic section of Lestat feeding off Armand and being very sexually flirtatious with him and kissing him and everything else. And I'm like, Armand, you wish, my angel. You wish. In the books, Lestat doesn't let Armand feed off him. And of course, in the books, feeding is equivalent to sex.
Yeah.
And Armand forces Lestat once or twice. So in the context of the books, that's deeply unpleasant.
Mm.
So none of this works. None of this is all just pure fan fiction on Armand's part. And he's such a petty little diva, is Armand. Because at this point, Lestat has turned Nikki, and obviously already it's not going well. And Armand can sense that and twists the knife by saying, "Oh, he's too fragile. He won't like recover from it." He's so mean. He's so mean. So obviously Lestat is uh trying to sort of find out from Armand what kind of the powers he has and everything else. And then we flick back to Lestat basically coming up with the idea of Théâtre de Vampire. And again, it's a little bit brutal that Armand solely credits Lestat with creating it when it is an organization which ends up killing his love, his daughter, and turning effectively his husband against him for the best part of a century. I did like the "I'm here" moment in the theatre when all the coven turn around to Armand like, "I'm here, you." I was like, Armand, could you not sense them, my angel? They're all there. Maybe he was just distracted by Lestat on stage. And then we get Lestat basically declaring his love for Armand and fucking him in the box while Nikki is watching. Absolutely not. Pure bullshit. Pure, absolute nonsense on Armand's part. But, it shows him as a spicy lover for Daniel, doesn't it?
Exactly, yes.
And then Louis re-enters the fray and claims that a week later, after Lestat has created this theatre, given Armand all the cash to run it, and found out how to do all the exciting things like freeze people and have fire and everything, Lestat's gone. And then we have Louis saying he abandoned Nikki, he abandoned Armand, he abandoned the coven. Lestat is, was, and always will be for Lestat. And I get so fucking irritated with Louis for that line. Because it's like, is this something that Armand has just fed you over and over and over and over? Or are you so angry at him that you truly believe that? Because even with the cheating, that's never been Lestat.
Yeah, I think it probably is an element of he's been told this so many times by Armand, or also he could just be playing up in front of Armand because, as we'll discuss when we get to later episodes, there's probably more of a reason for Louis picking Daniel to come and listen to his memoirs.
Mm,
So it could just
yep,
keep
absolutely.
keeping up appearances and, that facade of, yeah, no, Lestat sucks. It, could be very much an element of that to it.
Because I mean, Lestat and Louis get together, they get married on an altar, and 40 seconds later, Lestat is buying Louis pretty much whatever he wants. And yes, obviously you can't buy love, and that in itself doesn't mean anything when his behavior with Antoinette and obviously the horrific abuse that he inflicts upon Louis later on are completely inexcusable. But the notion that he was only ever for himself, when, as we've discussed, Lestat is just an attention-seeking ginger cat, is just sort of nonsense.
Yeah. Also, a week seems like a really short space of time to learn like how to do all those tricks.
Yeah, I agree. So what? He sets up the Théâtre de Vampire, and then within a week of performances, he's fucked off. That seems a bit speedy.
And especially as Lestat loves the crowd, he loves the attention. They'd have to drag him off of that stage.
Yeah, and I mean, I think in the books he gets fed up with the cruelty, and obviously Nikki is very, very ill.
Again, do you need, yeah, you need longer than a week
Yes,
for that to set in.
yes.
It needs to be at least a couple of months of,
Mm.
okay, yeah, no, this isn't working. Because I could see him getting bored because he likes to play with his food. So I could
Yeah,
see him getting bored of playing with his food in exactly the same way, but not after a week. He's not that much of a ginger cat.
no, that's true. He doesn't get that bored. Um, I mean, he stayed. I always He doesn't quite get enough credit for staying with Louis when Louis was horrifically depressed. Now, did he help Louis during that point by cheating constantly? God no. God no. That would be the point if we've always said that if we were their friends, we would be screaming at both of them for the love of God, get divorced. Lestat, leave him, go and live a happy life with Antoinette or whoever the hell you want. Louis, please, my angel, get help. Come be with us. Come be safe. We'll help you find Claudia. Just don't stay in this dreadful thing of like mutual loathing and stasis. But he does stay with him for 7 years.
Hmm.
So yes, I agree. The notion that he would get so bored in a week is sort of nonsense. And then we have Daniel saying a line which you can sort of see Louis almost mentally wincing at, which is never say I love you to a raging narcissist. Because of course Louis never said it, ever, once. Not to Lestat and not to Claudia, but he does say it repeatedly to Armand. Because you can love someone in very different ways, and I don't think his love for Armand holds quite the same weight. And then we do flash back to Louis and Claudia in Paris. And this is where we start with the bad decisions. Because, like, to be frank, the second they saw his portrait, they should have run.
Yeah.
The second they saw Lestat on the wall, they should have run. And then when Armand threatens him with Roger, they should have run. But we now have them in Paris getting their stories straight about Bruce. My angels, it is months too late for that. That should have been done before like the second they arrived in Paris and realized, well, they should have had their story straight full stop. I just don't, I think after all the traipsing around Romania, they just didn't think they were going to find anyone. And then when they did, I don't know how it didn't occur to them to be like, right, we need every single element of this down because they're doing the terrible thing of overly complicating things.
Yes.
Less is more when you're talking. If you're lying, less is more. Be as
Yeah.
vague as you can, and they're being way too specific. Um, Delaney Hales is incredible in this scene when they're talking about Bruce, when her hand is shaking as she's putting her lipstick on. What an extraordinary performance. And it's a real shame it wasn't really uh, raised or wasn't really recognized in the same way that genre is so rarely recognized. by all of the awards bodies because she is, I mean, it's just such a little moment, but it's just so powerful.
And then obviously throughout the episode we get to hear a lot more about her ordeal than she's
Mm,
vocalized before, which is also just horror.
devastating, devastating. And then Armand pitches up, and then I do find myself a little irritated with Claudia because the whole thing with Lestat is that she constantly criticized him for being a slave master, which towards the end is true. He was keeping them both captive, there's no question. But well, Lestat never saw them as lesser. That was kind of a Louis and Claudia thing. But was obviously wasn't forthcoming. He kept knowledge from them. And I think in Claudia's mind, that meant that he didn't see her as his equal, which I think Lestat always very much did see them as his equal. But he was also incredibly willfully ignorant about how much harder Louis and Claudia's skin tone made their lives. He just thought that because they were vampires, all that sort of petty stuff was now beyond them, and he didn't really understand why Louis, who was understandably still affected by racism in every single aspect of his life. But to see Claudia calling Armand Maitre and averting her eyes sort of makes me want to scream because you gave up one slave master for another.
Yes, and this one is very much not going to let her be as free as the last one. Obviously, towards the end, things got quite strict and regimented, but she's not even allowed to look in Armand's direction, and he's chastising her for being late and she's always being late and things. And yeah, it's yeah.
And what I like is that part of it is obviously kind of a hazing ritual for her, sort of paying her dues to be part of the coven. So there is there's this intriguing slight level of tenderness underneath Armand's words. I think when he's talking, like when he says, "Have you ever been early?" When she says, "Have I ever been late?" There is a slight teasing element to it, but again, it's the whole element of Louis and Claudia not really taking this very young, very lovesick seeming individual seriously as a threat.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing because he looks so young, he's so taken with Louis, he's being sort of in control, but in a kind of a gently chiding, teasing way with Claudia that she can just kind of write things off as, oh, well, I have to pay my dues. They're going to call me a flea and all the rest of it until I'm become a member of the coven. It's all just like very light-hearted. But no, it's not. No, this is, I mean, the one thing I do think Assad is incredible at is the aura of power. And that's very hard to do. I remember we did a play in school where it was about a child that was seen as a god. I think it's Children of the Lesser Son, Children of the Lesser God. And it's almost impossible to act. Like, particularly when we were kids and had no experience whatsoever. I'm sure it was terrible. But to try and make someone seem that powerful is very hard to do. And I do think that Assad does it absolutely effortlessly. I think you look at him and you truly believe that if he's annoyed enough, you're going to be dead in 20 seconds. And that's not easy to do without it looking a bit cringy or a bit naff. And he is incredible. But yeah, the whole thing is like their entire time in Paris, Louis and Claudia are basically frogs in water with the temperature being turned up. And they just don't understand that they're being slowly boiled alive. Because I just don't think they see this cutie pie is a threat. He's like,
Yeah.
oh, look at him. Look at this adorable little cutie pie. He's not scary. He's got big orange eyes and he loves Louis and he's all like fluttery around him. He's not scary. Yes, he fucking is. Yeah, he is. And then we sort of see a little bit of the workings of backstage. I love Ben Daniels as like the ultimate hammy actor, being furious that people are sneezing and stepping on his moments. And we get the horrific foreshadowing of the rat box, which is their way of sort of stripping down the bodies of their kills. And again, we have Louis just having lovely time, strolling the streets of Paris, taking his photos, just seemingly blissfully unaware of how much incredible resentment is building up against him. And it's like, oh, Louis, again, this is where it's like you are slightly bad at people. And I feel like both Louis and Claudia kind of had a false sense of security from their monster being Lestat and then being able to beat that monster so easily. I mean, Lestat literally let Louis kill him. I mean, yes, Claudia absolutely outsmarted him, but if we're being honest, was that tremendously difficult?
Yeah.
Nobody has ever accused Lestat of being a mastermind. The man's kind of a just vibes guy. I love that about him. He just sort of is like, we'll see how this plays out. And sometimes it doesn't play out tremendously well. So yeah, we have Louis and Armand having a beautiful nighttime stroll. And I mean, it's clear we know that Armand already knows about the stat, but he's already like making little jibes about, oh yes, your maker, your opera-loving motorcyclist, Bruce. And then sometimes it's just like, Louis, again, this is another red flag. Why are you not seeing this for the very polite threats that they are? But he doesn't. He's refusing to join the coven. He doesn't seem to grasp that that's not really a voluntary thing, and that by having his freedom, he is setting himself up against the coven, who are bitterly resentful of how much independence he is being allowed and resentful of him being allowed to have this much independence and freedom when Armand has the rest of them by a leash. And it's just like, ugh. And then whenever he can't spend any time with Armand without Lestat showing up. And it's throughout this episode, Louis' subconscious is warning him throughout, and he doesn't pay the slightest bit of attention to it. I mean, you are being joined in your meet cute summer fling walk by the hallucination of your dead husband. This should possibly worry you. He literally takes Lestat's picture, except he's not there. And then when Armand flat out tells him the coven is envious of your independence, he says, it's your problem, not mine. Oh, Louis. He just doesn't get group dynamics.
No. And I mean, Claudia's having an equally troublesome time at the theatre because obviously she's talking to Santiago, who she is in awe of
Mm.
for his performances and how he handles like the victims before he kills them. You know, she's asking like, how do you get them to be so calm and then they had that little discussion about lying, and then Santiago, he asks her some questions about like her life and Louis' life and Bruce and stuff, and again, like he makes some little comment about still needs work. And she's failing to grasp that he also knows that what she is saying is an outright lie as well. And yeah, it's these poor people.
Yeah, that's a really good scene. That's when he we find out that his name is Santiago's real name is Francis, that Armand has killed his maker, something which is very, very clearly a sore spot for Santiago.
Yeah.
Um, and that Santiago is the youngest of them, the one who was made the most recently. And he asks Claudia what she learned from her maker, Bruce, and she says, "Yeah." She says, "He taught me how to lie." And then he says something to her like, "Keep at it, you're almost there." So Santiago knows, like you said from minute one, that Claudia is full of absolute shit. They don't believe about Bruce. They know that every single thing she's saying about her maker is a fib. Ben Daniels is very frightening during that scene, I think. But again, like after that, I'd have been straight out of there. But Claudia, I think maybe has, well, I think it's a combination of things. I think she's just so happy to have found a place where she feels she can belong that it hasn't dawned on her that this is not her family, that these people mean her harm. And she's also got a slightly false sense of security in that she's like, wow, I dealt with Bruce. That was the worst thing that could have ever happened to me. And I did it and I came through and I was strong. Lestat was a challenge and I very effortlessly dealt with it. I can deal with anything that comes up. She just doesn't perhaps realize how cruel everybody is.
Yeah, and I mean, she does kind of go back to Louis and insist that they do maybe work on the story a bit more. Because I think before that, Louis is kind of like, no, we don't need, she's kind of like,
Mm,
we've got this now, like we don't need to. But I think she kind of reassesses that. But I think there's also that element of, yeah, but Maitra's like in love with like my dad,
yeah,
so even if the others don't kind of like, even if the others are jealous of me for whatever reason, like my dad's not going to get hurt. Dad's not going to let anything happen to me because that's very much how it was with the dynamic with Lestat. Louis would take whatever was going on between him and Lestat, he would take. But when it came to Claudia, there was kind of that line. So I kind of feel she feels a little bit invincible to a degree because of
yeah,
Armand's feelings for her dad.
yeah. And she just doesn't realize that Armand does not want to be a fucking stepdad.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate. I'm not really sure how both Louis and Armand managed to miss the Talamasca feeding Daniel with files, given that Daniel's ability to hide that fact was the equivalent of a toddler hiding behind their hands and thinking you can't see them anymore.
It was yeah, just the computers, like computer. Well, I mean, back when he was Rashid, Armand was referring to, the electronic mails,
Oh, yeah,
and
true, true. Yeah,
so maybe, the vampires aren't, they're not logging on Amazon and buying, doing any online shopping. So maybe they're not the most tech savvy. So they're like always talking those computer words, don't understand.
see, I reckon Armand has an absolute online shopping addiction. He dresses way too snazzily. I reckon he is online all the time and buying stuff for Louis because Louis doesn't know about the cloud. I reckon Armand, I mean, Armand obviously runs that household with a rod of iron, but I reckon he does all the shopping too. I reckon he spends all his time while Louis sleeping finding out new cool things to put in their grim prison home. Um, and then we get my favorite scene in the episode, which the more you think about it, the more insane it is, of Louis and Armand in the restaurant, and they're talking ethics and vampire ethics, and they're both being a little bit tedious, to be honest. And then we get Sartre joining them, which is good fun. But Louis gets bored. He gets bored of Armand, and that's the truth. He gets a little bit bored of him, of the conversation, and then as soon as he does, up pops the subconscious, and up pops Lestat, Louis, your subconscious has Lestat singing terrible things about you. Like, what are we doing here, my angel? Come to me, you little whore. I mean, it's a perfect opportunity, obviously, to have Sam Reid sing, and he is a beautiful singer. Um, but I would feel that if someone came and said, "Look, I'm having hallucinations of my dead ex-husband, sort of playing torch songs to me, in which he calls me a little whore, begs me to come to him, and says that, my new relationship is going to be naff because what is it? You'll fumble each other, incompetent lovers." I'd be like, oh, maybe we just need to not date for a little while. Maybe we need to
Yeah.
take time to find out who Louis is before we jump straight into a relationship that your subconscious is literally screaming at you to run away from.
Yeah, and I got like Louis kind of justifies that as it's his subcon he knows to a degree that it's his subconscious, but he just sees it as Lestat trying to control him from beyond and keep him away from being happy. When obviously, the truth is it is, his own self picking up on these red flags
Mm,
and say, no, 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 no. But because it's coming in the guise of
Lestat.
Lestat, with whom he has, complicated feelings towards, he can then write that off as, oh, well, it's just him. So I don't want to look at the trouble that he caused me. I'm not going to listen to him about this. He's lovely, this other one.
I mean, his subconscious is, I mean, there's obviously an element of like he's calling himself a whore. So there's obviously some really unresolved feelings about his relationship with Lestat, about how he's moving on. But his subconscious is like trying to get him away from Armand this entire sequence. Um, I mean, we get him saying, "Let me tell you a little something about 18th century Armand," and he immediately cuts him off. But again, there's some part of his subconscious that is going, "Run away from this man. Do not be next to him." I watched this episode on Netflix instead of the BBC because the BBC brand it, and I find that little logo in the corner irritating. And this sequence is censored because we have Lestat saying, "How is Armand still a bookbinder's wife?" instead of the appropriate, "How is Armand still a cunt?" Which, is accurate.
Yeah, and I mean, I obviously get, censoring people are sensitive about that word in other countries. It's a term of endearment for the Brits. I mean, it's also derogatory as well, but
It is derogative,
there's
yeah.
varying there are varying shades of being a cunt,
Yeah,
You can be a fun cunt, a silly cunt, or a fucking cunt, and
yeah.
that's the one you don't want to
You
be.
don't want to be a fucking cunt.
Um,
No,
and it's a shame that it has been censored because it's funny,
it is funny.
Lestat gets to be funny, the bookbinder's wife. I don't know that ye olde time. What does that even mean? Is that a slight? Is it? I guess I was obviously saying that he's boring, but like
Yeah,
so many
I'm
more
sort of
fun connotations with cunt.
I'm assuming it's sort of, yeah, an insult to be kind of like he's boring, I guess. Boring and weak. But yeah, I thought that was hilarious. I was like, wait, what? I hadn't heard that before. I know that because I've seen some of the threads that Americans have said that some of the AMC episodes are slightly edited, but I do find it bizarre that they don't edit for violence or sexual content, but do edit for swear words. That's very silly. Um, and then Armand just had enough by this point, which is fair. I mean, let's be fair to Armand. You would be fed up to the back teeth if this guy constantly lying to your face.
Well, yeah, and there's also Armand is aware that Louis hasn't let go of his ex, that his
Yeah,
ex is still around, and nobody wants to date that person that is always talking about their ex.
no, because I mean, you're on a hiding to nothing, aren't you? If you show, I mean, I once did, I went through I don't date now because to be honest, I don't want a man in my house. they're just like a lot of effort. But I did go through a little phase where I went on a variety of spectacularly dreadful dates. Holy God. I mean, that's an entire episode in itself. But I did show up to one and he mentioned his ex maybe 25 times in the
Yeah.
space of a 1 hour date. It was always like, oh, like everything I did, like everything I ordered, be like, oh yeah, no, Jane was always such a fan of that. And it was just like, no, no, honey, Angel, you shouldn't be dating. You miss Jane. Go talk to Jane. And if that relationship is done, that relationship is done. But regardless, you don't need to be inflicting this misery on anyone else right now. Take some time. Just take some time. And yeah, Armand is understandably like, this is insulting. I'm fucking done. We still don't know at what point Lestat arrives in Paris. He could already be under control at this point, so that would be even more insulting. Um, and so Louis eventually is forced to admit that his maker is Lestat, and Armand is pretty much like, yeah, duh, I've known for months. And he says, I fucking killed him and he had it coming. I love that subconscious Louis is like, debatable. That's not Lestat. That's his subconscious telling him it was debatable. And yeah, and the only time Louis ever gets truly upset is whenever people criticize his feelings for Lestat, which is the case here. So they get into it, they argue, he gets upset, and he races off, and then we get this very passionate scene between Louis and Lestat, except of course it's not. Louis is now just flat out sort of effectively having a schizophrenic episode. And he's cruising in the park where we've seen him before. He picks this poor guy who probably thinks he's getting incredibly lucky for the night with this very handsome man and promptly massacres him because the Lestat in his head is saying, kill me again, show me the only way you know how to love. Which is also not fair because that's not true of Louis at all. But that's what his subconscious thinks because he sees Lestat's death as a murder. And it's just like, oh, Louis. I mean, if you needed any more red flags, at this point you should just be leaving Paris. You have missed. He just doesn't get Armand, and I think that's the thing. They just don't see him as a threat. But I guess that's also part of, like we've discussed, that Louis, for all that he was surrounded by horrific racism, had sort of a privileged upbringing.
Yeah.
That his money sort of shielded him. So he's lived in this little bit of a bubble where the only real threat was Lestat. But he conquered that. So they all think, well, we don't have to worry now. And then we get back to Claudia and Louis. And I do think it is unacceptable that Louis does not immediately tell Claudia they know. Because they're blown at this point. They're completely blown. They've been blown for ages, but their Bruce nonsense cover is completely blown. And Louis' first words out of his mouth is, they know about Lestat. They know I killed Lestat. We need to leave. We need to leave now. But he doesn't want to ruin her experience with the coven. And then we get Delaney Hales talking about Bruce, which is heartbreaking. What's also heartbreaking is that, she criticizes Lestat for saying, you could have said, put your coffins on a boat and go to Paris. There's vampires there. But instead he said that vampires were vicious. And then she says he's right about Bruce, but he was right about the coven. It's just you don't know that
There's
yet.
a re there's a reason why he didn't tell you to get on a boat and go to Paris. I mean, granted, he could have, he could have said don't go to Paris, but the reason he didn't explicitly say go to Paris is because he knows what's in Paris.
He knows Armand's in Paris. He knows, as becomes increasingly clear throughout the series, that so much of Armand's actions towards Louis and Claudia are dictated by the fact that ultimately Lestat rejected him over and over and over. So this is his way of both punishing Lestat and punishing Louis and Claudia for not immediately ceding to his superior power. And yeah, it's, I think one of the worst lessons that Claudia has to learn during this series is that sometimes your mother is right. It's always a bit distressing when that happens because you always think your mum's full of shit. She doesn't know anything. What the fuck does she know? You're brand new. You're like no generation before you has ever understood anything about love or sex or danger or anything else. And the stats out there going, no, I will keep you safe. Now, again, no question that he fucked up several million times over by not telling them about the great laws. But yeah, there was a, as you said, very solid reason why he didn't tell them. Um, but that scene of Delaney talking about what Bruce did to her, which I even don't want to even recount, to be honest. Just watch it.
No, I mean, yeah, we cover. I think we covered enough of the Bruce thing on
Yeah,
the episode for
just watch it.
season one, but yeah, this is her kind of vocalizing it to Louis in a way that I don't necessarily think he's fully heard before, but he even here he's not fully hearing it because I think if he was fully hearing it, he would be a little bit more invested in keeping her safe from these people that he now knows they are, very much a threat.
I mean, Louis's heart absolutely breaks during this scene. Jacob Anderson is completely distraught, and you're going to see that from what we think is going to happen play out next series. But I think Louis wants Claudia to be happy. And this is where he makes the sort of the terrible decision that actually her happiness being with the coven is the most important thing because he still doesn't see these gaggle of idiots as a threat. He still sees them as this like funny group of hammy actors, and he recognizes Armand as a threat, but he doesn't see that the others are a problem. Like he sees Santiago as silly. He doesn't see that Santiago is effectively all the way through this series, Iago, trying, except not a particularly subtle one, trying to basically get Louis killed every second. We have Louis gone to the theatre finally to watch Claudia become part of the coven, and the other vampires are hugely resentful that he's not been there enough. We get Santiago's doing his whole inner monologue to Armand telepathically while Louis is in the audience. And Santiago fucking hates him.
Yeah, I mean, one props because we see it when, Armand discovers Lestat. Props to these guys for being able to hold a
I know,
conversation
right? I'd get
telepathically
too
while
distracted.
still
Yeah.
fully performing. I guess it's kind of like live television presenters who have got like the gallery and stuff in their ears, letting them know when there's going to be like a caption on the screen and everything. They're listening to that, but they're still interviewing the person in front of them. I guess, it is a skill that does exist, but props to them. But also, why can't Louis hear them?
Ooh, good question. So, yeah, they're not his makers. So they should be able to. I think it's just maybe they're better. I don't think Louis at,
Masking.
yeah, I don't think Louis at this point is strong enough or trained enough to kind of, because he's only used to doing it with Claudia, who is obviously wide open and very happy to talk to him. He's not really tried it with anyone else. We never see him trying it with Armand in these early episodes in Paris. So I think he's just like a stage dad, isn't he? They're delighted to see his little girl on stage. He's beaming away. He's invested in the performance. And he just doesn't realize that Santiago is up there basically plotting his death. You've got Santiago saying he will be the ruin of us. Like clear that, and we see that mutiny is absolutely brewing. All of the coven are glaring at Armand. Everybody is extremely pissed off that Armand has not either killed him or brought him into the coven. And Santiago says, "You killed my maker for less."
Yeah.
And it's like, oh. And this is like the problem. Armand, if you just went around ripping everybody's heads off, how did you think that you were going to be able to maintain order when you found your little fancy man? And this is why I always come back to, whilst book groups and everything else are exhausting, Armand, just kill these mouthy bastards that are criticizing your leadership and find new vampires that aren't going to comment on your relationship with the hot boy. Like, I just think that Armand was so used to this group that ultimately he was happy to cling to the status quo and the structure of this crumbling group rather than going, you know what? I'm Matra. Fuck you all. You criticize Louis again, I'm going to rip your head off. When it came to it, preserving the status quo was simply more important than Louis.
Mm.
Because, like, you're crazy. I mean, Armand is obscenely powerful. He could just presumably set Santiago on fire if he wanted to.
Yeah, because obviously Santiago is the newest member of their coven, so he's not.
Sort of. That's what I don't get. Like the audacity of Santiago criticizing him. I'm just like, Armand, put this shit down. Like, what are we doing here? Why are we allowing this gaggle of people to criticize your authority? Oh, sorry, I'm coming over super authoritarian here. But I don't get the power structure here. Why Armand allowed this mutiny and resentment to build. And then when he ultimately makes the decision that he makes, that we'll talk about in a second, why he doesn't just shut it down for the rest of that, the rest of it, why he doesn't just go, this is a decision I've made, you do not criticize it, you do not do anything. Instead, he just kind of sits back very passive, lets everything play out. I feel like Armand is in a way just like, I'm gonna roll the dice, see what happens, and then we're just gonna roll with it. Maybe he's not a great mastermind at the end of the day, much like Lestat. Maybe he's just like vibes. This is how things played out because he is the victor. Well, we still don't know what deal he ultimately makes with Lestat. And it's all about power and threats and violence, but he could certainly have been more authoritative in how he dealt with the coven, and he repeatedly chooses not to. He repeatedly allows himself to just stand back and let things play out.
I mean, maybe it's a little bit like how in his little story about Lestat at the beginning, where he says, I've been having similar thoughts for a while, but it was only through Lestat speaking it. I knew if I'd have come to the table with it, they wouldn't have paid any notice. But through him, we were able to implement these changes. So maybe he's past the theatre and he's
Mm.
past this coven, and through Louis and Claudia, he sees a way out of that where if he plays it right, he gets out of it looking to be the victim.
Yep, yep, absolutely. He could be like, you know what? I'm done with this. I'm done with the theatre scene in Paris. I'm exhausted. I'm bored. Let's just see how this plays out. And if it plays out the way I want it to, I get a new life with Louis. If it doesn't, we continue onwards because, you know, from his perspective, time is very different. I do think he doesn't trust Louis not to abandon him. I do think he's wisely, to be frank, not as confident of Louis's love for him as his for Louis, although again, it's a very, very unhealthy love. Um, But yeah, I think he just decides to sit back and let fate decide and hope that he comes out of it the victor, which he does. And we have Claudia joining the coven, and the shot of Claudia blindfolded with these people around her is just horrible. It's just really horrible. And she's so happy.
Yeah, I mean the ending sequence of this episode is really harsh because you're
Mm.
intercutting between Louis and Armand with, Armand basically, saying we don't want her. If you don't, join us, I'm gonna have to kill you.
Yeah,
And also like your daughter shouldn't exist. So the audience knows exactly what danger they're in now, and it's intercut with Claudia so happy and being welcomed in. But even then, Santiago reads her the five great rules, and you do kind of see her realize that she's broken over half
yeah.
of them. But she still thinks that's okay. Like when they say the one, that one of the rules is, to not make a crippled, like,
The dark gift. Yeah, the dark gift cannot be given to the crippled, the infirm, or children.
that's it. That's it. The infirm or children. The fact that she doesn't go, well, hang on a minute. Like, if I shouldn't be allowed, it's that just desperation for, I guess she hopes that they see her as for the woman that she is. Obviously,
Yep,
like Claudia
yep.
has this constant, internal conflict because outwardly she appears far younger than she is internally. So I guess in her head, because, I guess the opposite for us as people, we always think that we are
Mm.
younger than we necessarily appear outwardly. I'm still like 20 in my head. I'm very much not 20, visually anymore. Um, and I think for Claudia, it's the other way around. So she's kind of hoping that, well, I feel like 40. So these are my peers. They're treating me as such. So I'm not a child anymore. I was a child, but I'm not a child anymore. But yeah, they don't care. They just see that outward thing, and that is not allowed.
No, because at this stage in the series, I think Claudia is effectively my age. So she's not a child. She is a grown woman, kind of approaching middle age, really. But she is a kid. So there is this element, I think, of Claudia constantly thinking that, you know what, I know who I am, and you all know who I am because you are my family and you love me. But
Mm.
no, you're a girl. And we get, as you said, we get the five great laws, which is that every coven has to have a leader and you have to like take their rules. Dark gift can never be given to children. No vampire will commit to writing the history of their people, which Claudia has already done. No vampire may reveal themselves to a mortal, which Claudia is about to do with Madeline. And no vampire will kill another. And you can see the moment when Claudia is like, oh, I fucked up. And then once this beautiful ceremony has gone through and she's all happy and everyone's like, yay, we love Claudia, she's part of us, they immediately insult her by giving her the kiddie dress and the kiddie
Well,
play.
she's too good, you know. She's too good to be, kept on wet room duty. Did you really think we're going to keep you in the wet room? You're too talented, and it's that thing of like they're trying to stroke her ego, but at the same time they are just giving her a big fuck you as they present her with a little dolly dress and tell her that for the next half a century she's going to be playing like the daughter to these other vampires. And yeah, you can see that she kind of realizes that yeah, she's probably in over her head, but maybe it'll be okay.
That sequence is so upsetting to me because she thinks she's found family. She's found her family. She's found her loves. She's found where she belongs. And they immediately grotesquely insult her. They immediately insult her. What I think Ben Daniels does so brilliantly is that he's warm, he's funny, he's menacing, And I think in every single interaction with Claudia, his absolute loathing for her is really clear, but kind of hidden in this, sort of veneer of theatricality. Um, I don't think it's just that she's a child. I think that I'm afraid Santiago does not care for Louis and Claudia because of their skin tones. I think that's a huge element of it. But every interaction he has with her, I just want to be like, Claudia, run away from this man. Don't go near him. He hates you. He hates
Yeah,
you.
there's also obviously this upset that his maker was killed and
Mm,
she has been allowed to that they've both been allowed to live and that, as he says in that conversation with Armand, for doing far more wrong things. I mean, they're discussing the body of the person in the park that ended up like in the sewers and got found and made the news, and that ended, that risks revealing them. So I think there's that whole thing. It's like when you're like younger brothers or sisters or whatever get away with shit that you weren't
yeah,
allowed to get away with. And
yeah,
it's like, you fucking kidding me? Like,
yeah,
if that was me and I'd done that, there's that because it's been 5 months before
yeah,
they reached
yeah.
out. So he's had 5 months to build up that, and they've done this and then done this and they're just allowed to get away with it because they're the favorite child. So yeah, you're right, he never masks his contempt for her, but she's just so little lost sheep that she just wants to believe the Mr. Wolf that stood in front of her.
She just wants these people, and I mean, she eventually realizes before tragically coming back to see Louis. God, I wish she'd never done that. But she's just, it's like sometimes, I mean, we've all been there. Like, I had a group of friends who just kind of ghosted over the course of the pandemic. You always feel that a lot of us have been somewhere where we're like, these are my people, this is my tribe. And then they wildly let you down. Only in this,
Yep, been there.
yeah, they wildly, wildly let you down. You thought these were your people, you thought these were your ride or die, and then they're just dust in the wind when you actually need them. And Claudia is just, she's had, I mean, the poor girl was dragged out of a burning fire by two mentally ill gay men who decided to use her as a patch for their failing marriage. And then she had to just cope with their shenanigans. No wonder she tried to get them to leave. No wonder she tried to, probably during the course of her diaries, tried to turn Louis against Lestat so that she had a suitable escape route. I mean, this poor girl has been used, as she says during the trial, as nothing but, I mean, a pawn is the wrong word because Louis and Lestat do love her, but she's been used as a crux and an adjunct to their relationship the entire time. It's every single couple whose marriage is falling apart and decide to have another baby because that will make things better. No, it won't. It won't. And yeah, she thinks she's found her people, but she hasn't. These people don't give a fuck about her. These people are horrifically resentful, as you said, that they had to go. Like, I'm going to be honest, if I'm a coven member and these new people come to town, don't have the grace to introduce themselves, don't come around. I'm having to be in the sewers every night cleaning their shit out because they're just dumping bodies and they don't know about the flow timetables. I'm going to be pretty irritated after 6 months of that, to be honest. I'm not going to be in the best of moods. And then they waltz in. One of them can't be asked to come and see our beautiful theatrical endeavors on a nightly basis because, oh no, he's too special for that. And then you've got like the boss man who's massacred everybody else to the tiniest of slights, mooning over this guy and doing nothing to bring him in. It's no wonder that they hate them all. And we don't see how others have joined, but I presume with Claudia as well, that others weren't allowed to join quite so quickly.
Yeah, I am. Well, I think obviously in Claudia's case, they've obviously got a plan for what they're going to do with it because she's never. I think Armand said, she won't last long,
Oh,
but
that's so
she's
horrible.
not intended. Yeah, she's not intended to be a mainstay. But yeah, she does. Even though she's not intended to be a mainstay and their eventual plans for her are horrific, she still doesn't have to pay her dues as
No,
much because she's not working there, in the wet room for that long.
no, it's kind of hard to determine the passage of time. So they've been there for 6 months. And then Armand says, I've known for months about Lestat. But presumably they could only have been together or dancing around each other for what, 6 months tops?
Yeah,
So Claudia arrives within sort of 6 months. She's basically a featured player on stage. Any amateur dramatic society will tell you that that is enough to earn the everlasting enmity of every single member of the group. You have never seen. I did a couple of, again, I went through a weird phase, guys. I went through a weird phase. But all the amateur dramatics groups that I tried to join were more political than the Russian court. The notion that Claudia shows up and she's on stage in 4 seconds flat, it's like, no, that wouldn't happen without every single member of that company loathing it. Even if there is a plan to effectively humiliate her with the kiddie outfit in the new play. And then we get this while we're in, as you said, as we're intercutting with Claudia joining the coven, we get this horrific sequence of Armand effectively threatening Louis with death. And I think it's really interesting that Armand says those with the most power are often the weakest because, yeah, he has all the power in the world, but he's still, from an emotional point of view, is still trapped kind of an emotional maturity of that boy that he was in terms of his resentments and the way that he is very quick to anger. And he threatens Louis the entire way along as they're walking, to the extent that Louis is basically telling him his last words, saying, tell Claudia she's beautiful, tell her that every single morning. And then Armand lets him go. Armand effectively walks him home while threatening him.
yeah,
That is so fucked up on every single conceivable level.
yep. And then how does Louis respond?
He fucks him. And the thing is, I could understand it if Louis was turned on by this overt show of power. And I got no judgment for that. But that's not how the scene plays out. We have Armand effectively threatening him with death. We have Armand taunting him that Claudia doesn't need looking after. She won't be here for very long. Basically saying, look, Claudia's going to be dead because Claudia was always going to be dead because that's the design. And then after 30 seconds of Armand doing oh yes, I knew Lestat. He too broke my heart. I mean, everything, there were so many red flags in this episode that should have had Louis run screaming. Louis has just admitted out loud that he still carries Lestat with him, that he's still obviously very distraught about his death. You've got Armand sort of sympathizing, but sort of not. I mean, the fact that he says, I was with him a century ago yesterday. I mean, we're supposed to think that's metaphorical. I really fucking hope it was. That reference to yesterday isn't meant to be a very clever later realization that no, he means literally yesterday.
Oh, come on, you know this show. You know that it means literally yesterday. This show is very good at peppering some
Ah,
seemingly benign or flowery comment in, and then, several episodes or seasons later, it hits you like a gut punch when you realize actually what that meant.
so because it's so long between these series, you kind of come up with your own head canons, and that's very dangerous because we might well entirely discover that they call Lestat for the trial and he comes over of his own accord. And I don't see it. I only see Lestat coming over to protect Louis and for the promise that Armand will heal him for the injuries. And, perhaps he does only arrive right at the end, but I just don't see it. I think they have Lestat the entire time. And yeah, it will be absolutely just devastating if they already have Lestat at this point. But either way, Louis should have run bloody screaming at the suggestion that actually Armand is still so caught up with Lestat that he's prepared to sort of say, oh, a century ago yesterday, what's a century to a vampire? I mean, if this was just a guy that you ran into on the streets and didn't mean very much to you, you probably wouldn't be saying that. Like, there's a lot going on here, and you should probably run. Instead, Louis lets him in. And again, if Louis were a woman, we would be absolutely horrified at this point. We'd be talking about coercive control. We would be talking about the fact that this relationship starts with him having sex with the man who has just threatened his life, who has just threatened his daughter's life. We'd be questioning how much of this relationship is purely to keep Claudia safe. And yet people do really, really, and I mean, all power to them because, you like who you like, truly believe in this relationship and think it's like a really strong, beautiful thing. I think it starts horrendously. I mean, even if it perhaps somewhat morphs, you can't be with someone for that amount of time and there not be a degree of love. But it starts immediately after he has been threatened with death. I'm like, Louis, what are you doing? And I think what he's doing is trying to keep Claudia safe because I don't think he does it because he's scared of Armand. I think he does it because he wants to keep Claudia safe and he feels in that situation that that is the best way to dissolve the threat. Keep Armand on board. But yeah, we end the episode there and you're just like, oh, ick. Because if it was like, actually, you know what? That was kind of hot. Show me more. What powers you got, Big Daddy? Come on, show me. I could get it. I mean, I would, but we don't see any evidence of that in Jacob Anderson's performance that he's particularly turned on then. It's just, oh, actually, you walked me home. This was an oddly, I don't know, romantic death threat. But plus, if I'm having sex with the master of the coven, then he's probably not going to bother me and Claudia, is he?
Yeah, yeah, it's again, I don't know, I guess maybe I get a little bit more swept up in it to a degree that first time round because you don't know necessarily where things are going
Yeah.
yet because it's obviously it's set up to be the Coven versus Armand, and it's Armand's love for Louis. That's so when you're watching it through that first time, there is a little hint of a more like romance to it. It's like the Coven wanted me to kill you, but my
Oh,
feelings for
yeah.
you were too strong. I couldn't. So you kind of buy into that, but it's then again on that rewatch, or just when you reassess from knowing the conclusion of the story as far as the second season goes, that's when you look back and go, yeah, no, this was wrong. So you kind of do get a little bit carried away like Louis to a degree on a first watch, but it's when you then, peel back those layers that you go, yeah, no, no, the signs were there.
The meet cute when they are walking, when Louis is taking his photography, is lovely. They have really lovely chemistry. They have really lovely chemistry. It's very sweet. And it's why it's frustrating that it's like, Amand, you're already powerful. You do you. You want to have a lovely relationship with this guy. you can. It doesn't have to affect anything. It's just that Armand is a control freak and everybody has to be under his control. And so the relationship starts so wrong, so wrong. It starts with immediately after threats, and it just takes what were quite beautiful moments. And yeah, just turns them to kind of dust. And I have always felt for Armand in that he enters into a relationship with a man that, and he is the rebound, and he is the rebound throughout.
Yeah.
Louis, Louis loves him in as much as he can, but he is not Lestat. And he does repeatedly humiliate Armand in ways both intentional and non-intentional throughout the series. Because like the point at which he asks Santiago asks if they're companions, and Louis immediately says no. I mean, for me, phew, that would be it. That would be it. Um, he's kind of lucky that Armand doesn't kill him at that moment, but he does repeatedly kind of insult Armand by being with him and bringing his subconscious image of his dead husband with him throughout. So, but he chooses to enter into a relationship with a guy that he knows is still in love with someone else.
Yeah.
So neither one of these people are very happy. Neither one of them are choosing. That's what I said. This is an episode of fan fiction and exceptionally bad lifestyle choices. Like, come on, why are we? I mean, sure, hook up, have a lovely summer fling, but why are we getting invested to the point of mutiny from your coven with a guy that you know isn't in love with you because he's still caught up in the life and memories of his, well, dead husband? And poor Claudia. He doesn't want Claudia. He doesn't want Claudia in any way, shape, or form. She's an abomination to him. So it's just like, oh,
Mm.
this is just misery from all sides. We end the episode with Claudia is now a full member of the coven, but at what cost? At what cost?
Yeah.
Um, Louis is now in a relationship with the coven leader and perhaps feeling that that gives him a false sense of safety, which it categorically does not. And Armand is in this weird position of putting the status quo up for grabs and challenges to his, like practically forcing challenges to his leadership with his relationship. But as you said, perhaps part of that is just that he's just done with these people. He wants things to change.
Some people, yeah.
Yeah,
Some people just like to watch the world burn.
yeah. I think he just wants to see how it's going to play out, I think.
Yes. Yeah, and we will see how that does continue to play out when we come back in a couple of weeks for episode 4. I want you more than anything in the world. Until then, please do give us a like, rating, and follow wherever you are hearing us from, and get in touch with us on socials and or via email. And all of those details are in the show notes.
Bye.